Okay, so thank you and welcome to Envision Your Next Phase. I'm going to turn this over to Tom Woolridge, who's going to introduce Dan Clurman.
Hi, everybody. So I'm really excited to be able to introduce Dan today. I'm the department chair in the psychology department here at Golden Gate, and I've been here for almost 10 years now, I think. And Dan has been here longer than me. He's one of our most well-known, most requested instructors in the psychology department, and in a way, I feel like he's part of the sort of legacy of our department that stretches before my time here. So it's exciting for me to be able to introduce him to you. So let me read a bio for Dan to you. Dan is a coach, trainer, and organizational consultant. Since 1982, he's delivered communication training and coaching to businesses, government, and nonprofit organizations. His training and coaching emphasize the interplay of critical thinking, communication skills, and emotional intelligence. He teaches conflict resolution and coaching courses in Golden Gate University's Gino School of Business. He also teaches interpersonal business communication skills at UC Berkeley Extension. He's the author of Money Disagreements, How to Talk About Them, and Conversations with Critical Thinkers, 2 books. He's currently completing a book about his approach to interpersonal communication skills. For more info about his work, go to www.comoptions.com. So I think this is going to be a great webinar today, and I will turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Tom. And thanks everybody for being here. Today will be an opportunity to take stock of where you are in your work life, and also to practice a communication skill that I think is one of the most useful skills that I've been teaching people to use and using myself for the last 35 years, called reflective listening, sometimes called active listening. You're probably familiar with it, but this will be an opportunity to use it very specifically and to have someone practice it with you and be able to use it to explore where you are in your work and to your future visions of where you'd like to go. So we'll be doing this through a demo that Sue Ann will be doing with me, and we'll also do it in breakout rooms. You'll have a partner and you'll be able to practice in the breakout rooms, and you'll see the directions of the activity in the breakout room as well. And you'll also have an opportunity to discuss some of your observations about practicing the skill, as well as things that you notice, insights, observations from your discussions with your partner. So hopefully it'll be a chance to explore, especially during what's been, I think, for most of us, a pretty difficult year, to just take stock in a way of how the year has affected where you are in your work and where you want to go. So this will be a nice opportunity to do that. So before I demo this with Sue Ann, I'm just going to do a little explanation of what reflective listening is. I'll just share my screen, and here we go. So everybody should be able to see this. So reflective listening is pretty simple in concept, more difficult to practice. It's just listening to understand rather than to agree or disagree. And what you're doing is you're paraphrasing in your own words your understanding of what somebody says. And that seems simple enough, and yet as you practice it, I think you'll find it's a pretty radical activity, because most of us, when we're listening, often have a little voice somewhere in our minds that's saying, well, I agree with that. No, I don't agree with that. We're commenting and evaluating. So even though it seems simple, it's pretty radical. So anyway, you'll get a chance to practice. The great thing about reflective listening is it doesn't matter whether you make a mistake when you're doing it, because the speaker will usually correct you or add on, and you just reflect the corrections. And you'll see how that works today. So we're going to I'll demo it, and then I'll put up the tips for it, and you'll be able to practice it, move into practicing it right away. So Sue Ann and I are going to show you how it works. So I am going to ask Sue Ann the question that you'll be working with. I'm just going to take a quick look at it myself. And the question is, Sue Ann, what aspect of your work life would you like to talk about today that you'd like to explore?
So even before COVID, I'm always in conflict between my sense of creativity and what makes good business. And it's kind of like a left-right brain kind of struggle for me. And now, and particularly in COVID, all that has to get readjusted. And in my work, a lot of it has to do with how, like as an adjunct or even as an artist of sorts, how I can communicate with things and how do I stay ahead of the technology and figuring out ways that I can deliver even things like a workshop or other things that I'm working on in a way that's novel or going to be inviting or going to be a little bit unique and engaging to people. And I struggle with that like in the middle of the night, because like I just don't feel like the status quo works for me.
Okay, let me see if I understand so far. So part of what's going on for you in this current period, is that you have a desire to be creative with your work and to find ways to express it somewhat differently. You're sort of not satisfied with, you call it the status quo of how you do it. So you have an urge to innovate, and you're not quite sure how to do that during this period, and also to gear what you're doing to fit with the ways that we're communicating technologically now.
That's exactly right. And then it builds from there. That's exactly right, because it challenges, your sense of your sort of creative sense. It challenges me because I don't have control over the technology. So, I can't tell them what I want them to do and have them do it unless I do it myself. And that even isn't talking even about content, what the content is going to be. And that's just about the delivery service.
So one side of it is you have less control in the sense of the media that you're using, and in a way I guess you're trying to figure out how to gear yourself towards that, where you have more of a constraint. And then the other side of it is also just to figure out what the content will be, what the new content will be for you.
Yes, that's exactly right, and it creates a whole lot of anxiety.
Ah, I see. There's something about approaching both of these right now that is, it sounds like it's like raising the bar for you in a way that gives you that sense of anxiety.
Yeah, and it's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable to deal with it.
It used to be just uncomfortable, just kind of developing content, and now it has all these other paradigms thrown in.
Okay, so we could go further with this conversation. I'll do one more reflection to open it up further, which would be, it sounds like also that there's some aspects of the technology and content that you've been specifically pondering, that you want to start to figure out.
That's very true, and that sort of confirms my sense of creativity, because it's not something that you can judge. So what you just said confirms my sense of that kind of journey, and that's a legitimate journey to go on.
That you don't exactly know ahead of time where you're going to go with this, and that's part of the excitement of discovering it, but also this anxiety and not knowing where it's actually going to take you.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here. We obviously could go on, but I'm just going to ask you, Sue Ann, how was it for you to be reflected in that way?
It was good because it puts into other words what I'm thinking as I'm feeling them and saying them. And it also reconfirms those things that I'm not sure about, because when I hear it back, it sort of legitimizes my own feelings about and thoughts about what I'm trying to express, because I'm fumbling over what I'm trying to express, and you're helping me sort of organize it.
So it organize it and sort of make it tangible for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. And so you notice I stated for the group, I stayed in a reflective listening role throughout, which is kind of artificial in a way, because normally in a conversation, you have this dynamic of going back and forth, and I didn't do that. I did that, and it was somewhat artificial to demo the reflective listening, and you're going to stay in that reflective listening role as much as you can in a way that I did. Typically, you might not reflect that long, but for purposes of practice, it's useful to do. And also, it sounds like it was useful for Sue Ann in that it concretized certain things for her. Also, normally, and you're going to do this in your practice, you do, when you reflect somebody, want to respond to what they're saying, because if I just said thanks and walked away, she would not know how that affected me, and that would be an important piece of information for her. So I will say in response that I resonate a lot with what you're saying. Being in a similar position of having to teach and do trainings through Zoom, I have to adjust what I normally do in person to deal with the technology, and that's forcing me into a bit of the same quandary, I guess, of figuring out how am I going to innovate my own content in the way that I guess you're trying to figure out too. So I connected a lot with what you were saying, and it'd be fun to have a conversation about this further. So that's just a little response from me. Obviously, we could launch into a back and forth. So before we go into the breakout rooms to practice this, I'm going to put up some tips about reflecting, and then I'm also going to take some observations. First, I'll take the observations or questions from the group. Does anybody have something they want to ask or an observation about doing reflecting? You could type it into the chat, and that'll be read to me. So, or you can say it, I guess, too. So go ahead if there are any questions.
It seems like there's a fine line between repeating what someone said and telling them what they said.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of, to tell someone what they're saying, I might respond like, wait a minute, why are you telling me what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So how do you get around that?
Really good point. Really good point. So when you reflect, you are staying with what the speaker gives you. You're not adding your interpretation. You're not sending a message about it. Notice I didn't send my own message into that when I was reflecting. I just reflected. And I'm really trying to stick with what she was saying, and I'm not adding my spin. So if I make an error, which is possible, and it's okay, it's perfectly okay, it's a self-correcting process, I'm sure Sue Ann would say, that's not what I'm talking about. And she'd say, this is what it is. And I would reflect the corrections. And when you're reflecting, it's really important to reflect the corrections, because if you don't, the speaker will think you're lagging behind, you're not paying attention. So a great point, Holly. Stay with what the speaker's saying. Your job is only to do that. The other key is to reflect in your own words. It's really important, because if I just parroted back her words, that doesn't add a lot of value. That's just, that could sound patronizing, in fact, to somebody. So they'd say, are you using some sort of technique on me? It doesn't really let the person know how they're coming across to you. You're translating it into your own language is what adds the value for the speaker. So I'm glad you asked the question. Other questions?
Hi, Dan. We have a question from Lori. It says, in what we're doing, is it okay to start with, quote, let me see if I understand you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in general, I don't recommend using any jargon, like I hear you saying that, or let me see if I understand you. that also might sound a little patronizing to people because it sounds a little techniquey. Just launch right in, and you can use what I'd call more provisional language, like, so possibly what you believe or you want is this, or you think that, or lately you've been looking at. You can just go ahead into it. Remember, the speaker will correct you. You stop reflecting if they come in, you wait for the correction, and you reflect the correction. It's what I would call staying in the loop with the speaker. Ideally, your reflections are concise. They capture the key elements of what the speaker's saying. And if the speaker interrupts to correct, you stop talking and just let them correct. But no need for jargon.
Well, I didn't mean it by jargon. I just meant that sometimes it can feel like, why are you saying what I just said? Like the last person said, and that's where it's say, let me see if I'm getting this, you know, or I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, not in a jargony way, but just to say, well, where am I in this? Why are you like saying what I just said?
Yeah,
so,
that's fine. That is fine. If you, and in fact, here's another key element. I'm going to put the tips up to reiterate this. If, and this is really, really key, if a speaker is going on longer than you can actually track or follow, it's important to interrupt them and to say what Lori just said, which is, wait, before you go on, let me see if I'm understanding so far. Because if you wait till someone is finishing and they're just going on and on, you only may remember the last thing they said and miss the whole middle part, which would be unfortunate. So it's actually, you're doing the speaker a service if you interrupt, and that phrase that Lori used is perfect. Let me see if I understand so far. I've never had anyone object to that. And get your reflection in before you start to lose track of what you're saying. So good point. Other questions before we start to practice? Okay, let me just do one last reminder for you of the tips, and then we're going to go into the breakout rooms. So just what I said, reflect before you forget. And the phrase, no one has ever objected to that I've used. I'd like to see if I understand before you go on. Remember, your reflections don't have to be 100% accurate. That's the great thing about it. Don't even worry about it. Just give it your best attempt. The speaker will correct. You reflect the corrections. Remember that reflecting is different from asking questions. Questions are useful, but the difference is reflecting follows where the speaker is going. Questions are usually about what the speaker thinks, what the person who's listening thinks would be interesting for the speaker to talk about. So the agenda of the question is coming from the person who's listening, whereas with reflective listening, it's purely coming from the person who's speaking. And that's a very important difference. I'm not saying questions aren't useful, but they're a different tool. And sometimes all that somebody wants is just for you to understand. I'm sure many of you have had the experience where you started to talk about something that was important. Somebody started asking you questions, and the questions weren't really related to what you were trying to talk about, and it got frustrating. That's where questions can derail somebody. Just what we covered, don't use jargon. And the other thing is, when you're reflecting, don't mix your own messages, your own responses in with the reflections. In other words, you reflect, and then maybe you'd say, yeah, and I kind of agree with what you're saying, and I think that. Don't inject any of your opinions. Just reflect. There'll be a point where the speaker will stop talking or just slow down. They're handing the ball's in your court. They're handing it over to you. Then you can speak. So for practice, you're going to stay with the reflecting. They'll come to a stop after 5 minutes. We'll broadcast that direction into the breakout room so you'll know time to wrap it up. Then you'll give your response, and then you'll switch roles. Okay. And the directions, just very quickly, is you're going to agree to keep the conversation confidential, so you can disclose whatever you wish, but at least it'll be confidential between You'll choose who's going to speak first and who's going to be the reflective listener first. Each of you will have the opportunity to play roles. We'll pace it through broadcasting in. And then you'll ask the person who's speaking that question, what do you want to focus on? And then you just follow them with reflective listening, summarizing your own words. And you'll do this for about 5 minutes, then you'll stop. And at the end of that, the listener, the person who's reflecting, will give their response as I did. And then you'll switch roles and follow it through again. And this is all in the handout that we uploaded into the chat, but it's pretty straightforward. But the handout's there in case you want to download it. It's a PDF file. Okay. Any last questions before we send you into the breakout rooms? You're good to go. And remember, have fun with it. It's just to play with the skill, practice. You don't have to rigidly adhere to it, but give it your best attempt as a way to see what it's like to practice reflecting. And we'll come back into the gallery and compare notes. You don't go to part 2. We'll do part 2 separately on the handout, but we'll compare notes. We'll take about 10 minutes or so for this. So be crisp and just get right into the practice. Okay, we'll send you into the breakout rooms. You should have just one partner. And here we go. Okay.
Hi, Dan.
Hello. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're going to just sort of debrief the activity, and want to ask you, how was it? And basically, you can comment about how it was to have that conversation from the point of view of being the speaker and being reflectively listened to. How did that affect you and your ability to talk about your work where you are now? And also as the reflective listener, what it was like for you to reflect, if you had certain struggles, if you started to ask questions automatically. What did you discover, basically? So either way, content-wise or just from the process of playing with it. So any observations, questions? Janice, are you raising your hand? Go ahead.
Hi, as a speaker, it was nice to have someone who responded to what I was going through in a different way than automatically trying to fix it, which is my automatic method for myself. That was really good. As a person listening, it was so hard not to automatically try to fix someone or sympathize with someone, instead just respond the way we're supposed to be doing here.
Yeah, just from a little show of hands, how many people had that experience? Yeah, right. That's very typical. Is we have our, I guess you could call it, typical ways of responding to people. And I know mine, being a professor, is to give people advice, which is really different than reflective listening, to try to fix it. So it's a very different activity. It's not unusual to find your usual habit coming back up and wanting to give advice, ask questions, use some humor, whatever. Yes, Jan.
Actually, reflecting upon our reflections, it's actually kind of a relief to listen reflectively. Actually, I mean, if I make the decision ahead of time, it can be a relief because I'm very focused and very present, and it's natural for me and probably a lot of people to want to fix things. But what a relief not to have to take on that role for a couple minutes. Yay.
Great point. Great point. In that, one of the beautiful aspects of reflecting is it really allows you to listen and absorb and consider through trying to understand, and let go of the burden of trying to cook up an immediate response before you get the depth of understanding that comes with reflecting. So really nice point on that. Yeah, other comments, observations? I may not be able to see you. Lori, go ahead. You have to unmute.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. My partner did such a great job, and it reminded me again of a couple of things, which is so many times when I speak with people, they go, boy, that reminds me of a time when I went over here. And it's sort of like I feel like the rug up, well, wait a minute, I kind of want to say a little more or just be felt. And the other thing was that I forgot how much this helps me fine tune. Like she would reflect me and then say, yeah, as a matter of fact, that's the part of it that's so important to me. So I just go deeper and deeper with myself with their help. And I have such appreciation for that because I wasn't doing it with myself till then. So thank you. This is all really helpful.
Great. That's a beautiful side effect of reflecting is even though you're just trying to understand, it's a kind of advocacy for the person who's speaking and really allows them to start to hone in on the nuances of what they're trying to really articulate. And I believe that too often we don't know what we want to say until we start to articulate it and try to say it. To articulate it is to start to define it. So reflecting does that.
Yes.
Yeah. Other observations, comments, and if I can't see you, just speak up. Other observations, comments? You ready to move on? Peggy, you have to unmute.
I just wanted to jump off of what Lori said with speaking with my partner, both listening and hearing her speak. I found myself getting really upset, just, realizing things about my work life that I hadn't, I'd sort of been pushing to the back a little bit. And then listening to my partner speaking and feeling upset for her too. I mean, just that kind of, it brought up other issues besides reflective listening. It brought up other issues about our work lives. So I think it's it's kind of a heavy question.
Yes, right. And the reflecting elicited more information, and you got to sort of comprehend some of the things that had been on the back burner.
Yeah.
And so that's a powerful aspect too. Hopefully our next breakout will give you some new directions with that. Okay, any other questions before we go into the next? Jan, go ahead.
I have a comment about if we're going to do another breakout. My partner and I went, probably 4 minutes with the first speaker before we got the instruction to switch. So somehow I think if there's a way we could be reminded when it's time to switch sooner.
Okay.
We were kind of confused on that. So anyway.
Okay, we'll put it in at the 2 minute to switch level. Okay. All right. So I'll just do a quick share screen and just go over. So in the next breakout room, you're going to take this further and you'll be talking about possible future directions. You'll still maintain that same reflective listening format, and this is detailed out on the PDF we uploaded into the chat, so you can follow part 2 directions. But these are the questions. Obviously, you can improvise on the questions too. Now, these are launching points. So part of what the idea of this breakout session is for many of us, we don't, given the challenges and conditions of what we've been living with, it's hard sometimes to explore in a way where you get this kind of attention through reflective listening, what those future directions are. And yet often my belief is in our work lives, we do have intimations, we do have a sense of possibilities, or we do notice transitions, but sometimes they really are staying on the back burner because we don't have opportunities to talk about them and be listened to in a very full way. So here you get to have that conversation, and obviously you can't go into as great depth with the amount of time we have, but hopefully this can plant the seeds for having future conversations and just to dream a little bit about possibilities. So obviously you may not fully work this up or discover all the things you want to say, but at least it's going to launch that conversation with a partner. The questions are, how would you like your work to develop over the next year or period of time? You know, what's your future vision? And what challenges or transitions do you anticipate? You know, if just one of those questions seems particularly useful, go for that question then. Don't worry about doing all of them. Just pick one that you resonate with, and your partner will reflectively listen and follow you down that path. If you do all three, remember your partner needs to reflect after your response to each of those questions. Don't just answer them. Get the reflecting in, as you can see. So we're going to put you into the breakout rooms. We'll broadcast a little earlier. Again, we'll take about 10 minutes or so to do this. Then we'll come back and we'll do a gallery sharing again with this. Is everybody clear on the next task? Okay, so you should be getting your same partners again. We'll go into the breakout rooms now. We'll broadcast 2 minutes into the switch roles part. Continue to reflect corrections. Don't worry about getting it wrong. Keep the reflective listening going before you switch roles. Okay, enjoy. Okay, everybody, welcome back. I think we're all back. So let's do a similar debrief. How was it for you to once again be reflected on the next phase? Just to sort of till the soil, to open it up. Obviously, there's so much more one can talk about, both as the speaker and as the reflective listener. What did you notice as you got to practice the next round? And if I don't see you, you can just speak up because we have a couple screens. So you can raise your hand or speak up. Observations, insights. Yes, Jan.
I just was going to comment that I found it helpful that you gave us the 3 questions ahead of time. I didn't download anything. It's too much for me to look at that and try to manage everything. So, but I also saw the one question that I would like my partner and me to work with.
Mhm.
So, and I was able to remember that. I mean, sometimes there's not a really good memory bank going on up here these days. So I started out before we even started the reflecting back and forth. I want to talk about that question, please. I saw that ahead of time because I knew that would be helpful to me. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Great. And you got to. Yes, Janice, did you have something to say?
Yes, one of the problems with these questions being so deep, we have deep questions and short amount of time to do it in. So it made it more difficult than it would be if it was shorter questions. It was good to talk about them, but they were very deep.
More time would be nice. Yeah, sure. Yes, MJ.
So my comment was actually almost the exact opposite, which is that for such a short period of time, we actually got pretty deep. That said, the first time we didn't realize that it was 2.5 minutes each. We did like 5 minutes. And so we ran out of time. This time we flipped it. And unfortunately, since we have the same partners, we were able to do that and kind of balance things out.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. Other insights, observations? Ellie. You have to unmute, Ellie. There you go. Still muted. You have to unmute again. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
One of the things that happens to me when I'm listening to people is that I want to know more. So I find myself wanting to ask questions about something they said. And it's really hard for me not to do that because I want to know, I want to understand better what they mean or what their idea might be when they say something. So to me, that seems like it might be part of reflective listening, but I don't know.
Yeah, question asking is not part of reflective listening as I define it. and I'm pretty strict on that side of the coin. However, questions are valuable, and it's not to say you can't use them. I think what's helpful is to be aware of the difference between them. That when you ask questions, it's really starting to focus on what you think would be valuable for the other person to talk about, which may or may not be valuable for the other person to talk about. The reflective listening completely leaves the other person in the driver's seat. So I'm not saying don't use questions. I'm saying be aware that you're using a question and how that's going to maybe shift the direction of the conversation. And it still could be perfectly fine. The person might be really glad you asked that question.
Right.
So it's okay. The way I like to use this, I teach a coaching course, and one of the things I often tell students is, if you ask a question, reflect the person's answer. So they get to open it up. Often I see people asking a question, the person says something, and then they ask another question, and it's sort of like what the person said just drops out of sight. So the reflecting opens things up and follows the path that the question opened up.
Right. I see. Yeah. So you just stay focused on the actual subject matter.
Where they're going. Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe we have time for one more observation, and those who need to take off, but I'll stay a few more minutes to continue the debrief and conversation if you want to. We have a few minutes we can stay. So anything else? One more question or comment for today? I can't see you, just start speaking. Okay, nothing yet. So I'll bring it to a close, but I'll stick around a little bit in case anyone wants to follow up, just so we officially end at 12. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming and participating and trying this out. And I encourage you during the week, play with it a little bit in conversations. Just the way to get good at reflecting, and you can continue to refine this as a skill. There's a lot of ways to do that, is just throw it into conversations where you realize you have a habitual habit, say, of starting to give somebody advice when they start talking. Notice it and then say, maybe this time I'll just try a reflective listening response just to see how that shifts the dynamics of the conversation, see what happens, how it affects the conversation. Maybe your advice will be better targeted if you do a reflection, for example. But practice it and keep it alive for yourself, and see how it is, see how it works in your life as a tool. There's a lot more to learn. If you're interested in it, you can go to my website, sign up for my newsletter. I do workshops and trainings on this. My wife and I are writing a book about our method. I've been teaching it for 35 years, a whole communication skills set. Get on our mailing list. You'll get information about what we do with training, and our upcoming book will be out sometime in June or July. Anyway, it's delightful to work with all of you today, and I encourage you to continue the conversations, the seeds we planted here, and to feel free to be in touch. My email's also there if you want to follow up on anything. I'm happy to follow up with you. I hope you all stay safe, healthy, have a safe and healthy New Year and holiday. And I wish you much peace and satisfying conversations. So thanks for coming today.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks
Happy
so much,
holiday.
Dan.
Happy holiday.
Thank you so much.
It was great.
That was
The
good.
link is in chat.
Okay, the links are in the chat. So take care, everyone. And I'll stay around for those who want to continue a little bit further, just to answer any other questions or comments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, just trying to, I joined in because I saw the email and saying, Dan Clurman, that's my professor in 2005 when I was taking the group dynamic, So I just curious about it, so I joined in. Thank you so much,
Oh, and nice to see you again. It's been a while.
Way long back then. Yes, and those things. So enjoy.
So other observations or things you want to ask about, or comments? Or I can go on a little bit and give you, yes, Amy, go ahead.
Well, we couldn't help but be encouraging to each other at the end of our reflective listening. And actually that was a very nice aspect. The reflective listening was great, and the encouragement and being able to reflect back what we saw in each other was quite lovely. And having a very short amount of time, we got right to the heart of the matter. And ironically, one of the things that my partner is looking for in the next phase of her career is something that I think I may be able to help connect her with. So that was really satisfying.
Oh, great, great. It sounds like the time compression actually facilitated just being crisp in a way in the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for exploring and being here with this.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Vera. Yes, Janice.
I'm just going to say thank you, and I'm going to leave. Sorry.
Okay.
For the webinar. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for being here. Okay.
Great, thank you, Dan.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, and thanks for being here. My friends are here too, so I'll be in touch.
So who wants to see more communication stuff in the future?
Do you want to see more communication? Yeah?
Yeah.
Peggy,
Yeah.
yes.
I think this would be a really valuable, Irene says this. I think there's a couple of things that came to mind that we can do over the next 6 and 8 months, and including the meet the author when your book comes out. But I think to help people along with this change in their lives, I think we should talk about another one, something similar.
That'd be fun.
Very
Yeah,
valuable.
much more depth and bring another communication tool in.
Yeah.
Great, great. Okay.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
Ellie, thanks for being here. Ellie and Peggy, two of my good friends.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.